We are thrilled to have such an impressive group of participants, both the speakers and all of you who have joined us for this conversation today for an event we're calling From Billions to Trillions, the Inflation Reduction Act as a catalyst for private investment. We have an exceptional program planned for all of you today.
As the title of this event implies, and as you've just heard, scaling solutions to address our most pressing climate challenges will require extraordinary levels of investment from both private and from public sources.
So talk to us a little bit about, what is the IRA, and particularly when it comes to the private sector, what's been the impact so far?
Look, I think I described the strategy of the Inflation Reduction Act as government-enabled but private sector-led. The biggest investments in the Inflation Reduction Act really work through the tax code. They incentivize people, and I think one of the things that's really quite different from what we've seen over the previous really couple of decades is that you have 10 years of certainty in most of the provisions of the code.
It's not all rainbows and sunshine as we think about the initial implementation of these policies, but they're very important and certainly a tailwind in creating certainty, creating jobs, allowing sort of a clear runway for the investments that we're making, both in terms of capital deployment as well as human capital to grow the business.
But in all seriousness, let's talk about what is not a stumbling block. And what is not the stumbling block is the technology itself. So whatever problem needs to be solved, there is a solution.
30 years from now, our employees are going to look back at this time and say, I was there when this transition happened and I helped it happen. And so it's just an absolutely inspiring thing.
I think that in the venture capital world, as we'll talk about more, we sort of struggle with how do we invest in these technologies? How do we invest in these companies that might be far more capital intensive than a $20 million minority check will get you, or might have much longer time horizons. So we still have ambitions to help support those technologies. So how do we sort of de-risk some aspects that make it more palatable for us?
Somebody needs to be first. And I think that for the most part, those first-of-a-kind products need concessionary capital of one form or another. And ultimately, it has to be public sector dollars that form that concessionary capital, whether that's in the form of outright grants and other assistance to build plants, whether that's in the form of tax credits and things like that. But there has to be concessionary capital to put these things on a cost curve and to understand what their ultimate cost entitlement is.
The reality is that you need the large, big, incumbent companies just like you need the smaller, disruptive companies. I think there's a role for both players to play.
Look at the projects that are occurring now. Obviously, the startups, the innovators, they have a huge role in the transition, but we also are transitioning the incumbents. And they do have balance sheets, and they do have goals, and they are eligible for many of the tax incentives.
But in the infrastructure space, we suffer from this huge problem where, particularly in the hard tech space, you've got a lot of folks who invest in A rounds and B rounds and C rounds, and then they get to the commercial project, which often costs $1 billion, right? And that's just a lot of money. It's been a lot of money, it's still a lot of money, it will be a lot of money.
And again, I think it's more than just the government incentives. There's got to be, there's got to be the carrots, there got to be the sticks, but there has to be customer demand, there has to be technological innovation. I think what we're seeing now is much more private capital coming in, whether it's credit, equity, venture, because you've got this really confluence of forces coming together at the same time.
It's hard to know if you're an under-resourced government where you put the project, how to get the first gigawatt in place, like what you do. And so philanthropy can play an important role in finding the experts who are on the ground, based in countries, who can do that kind of technical work. show where you site a project, connect the right developer to the people who are going to do the permit, all those things that you might take for granted in a market like the US.
Do you have thoughts about the roles that universities can play beyond just that?
Yeah, so no, I think I'm really excited about what Duke's doing with the climate commitment and all the things you're leading, and so many others in the room are contributing to making it happen at Duke. It is so important to have universities help lead in this, and I think of it as an ecosystem. I mean, we have government, we have NGOs and policy influencers, we have businesses, we have investors, so we have all these constituencies that are in and around energy transition. And a lot of them are viewed as having strong views, or maybe even an agenda. And I think the university, such as Duke, can play such a role as being, I don't know, a balanced participant in terms of a balanced view, not necessarily having a strong view or an agenda, but really just trying to look at the landscape and get to the right solution.